the second time in 3 months, floods ravaged the northern coast of New South Wales. 200 square miles of Australia's richest dairy farming area lie submerged. Devastated by the swirling waters is the town of Kempsey, where the River Macleay rose 5 feet in one afternoon. Stock losses are set at £3 million. More than 15,000 cattle are drowned. Hundreds of rotting carcasses litter the countryside. The loss in dairy cattle may bring a reduction in butter exports to Britain. Once thriving Kempsey is now nothing but mud and wreckage. 15 people are known to have been killed, hundreds more are missing. 6,000 are homeless.
That was a terrible flood. Nobody was prepared. No warning at all. That's why I think there were so many caught in Kempsey. The river broke first, and of course, that's where everybody got caught. My father-in-law was told to shift the cattle, and he said, no, they'll be all right. But of course, the flood came over the river, and the backwater came. They were all drowned. They were hanging on the barbed wire fence, and the noise of the roaring of the cattle and the noise of the river, I don't think I'll ever forget it. It was absolutely terrible.
It was unbelievable. I think they might have called it nowadays what they call a rain bomb. All the water from up the river, from Bellbrook, Kamara, all them places, just started building up, and they all got hit at once with this rain bomb. And it slowly moved down. It was the noisiest thing. You wouldn't believe the noise. It was that damn loud. Roaring. And I said to Mum, what's that? She said, that's the water coming down from up top. It come down like a waterfall, about 3 or 4 foot high, you know. And it was damn roaring. It hit the viaduct, nothing really happened. The water just eddied around it and built up and built up. And then some logs come down from Hennessy sawmill. Yeah, it found the spot too. We're looking at it there, and I said, Mum, there's something funny going on out there. Why? Because the viaduct was going like that. Completely knocked it over.
That shocking inundation happened yesterday in the space of hours. The water in the main stream rushed down as an irresistible torrent, 30 feet high at 20 knots, sweeping all before it. The amazing thing is that the loss of life was not 10, 20 times greater than it was.
The power of the water and the power of the logs, and they said it was the second fastest flowing river in the southern hemisphere.
The smell, I remember the smell afterwards was terrible. I remember going out, cleaning a house out. It was up high, but the flood still got in it. It was a mess.
There was a lot of destruction as far as farms and fences. The rubbish that come down was hitting the fences and just taking it with it, you know, and knocking them over. The mud that was laying around the town was unbelievable. The shops, I never got down to them because you had to wash all them out because it gets the silt in there and it stinks. Backwater, just laid in there and wouldn't get away for about 3 or 4 days. It stink. Oh. The council come in and the fire brigades and all them, and they washed the streets down, washed houses down inside the houses, because the mud, honestly, from them floods, it was that thick. And when the sun hits it, cake's hard. But they did have little front end loaders going along, scooping up what they could, the heavy stuff, and getting rid of that.
They got the cattle off the fences in Gladstone, and they tied them up and towed them to the river because they were drowned anyhow, you know, but they had to get rid of them. And here they were. You'd see them floating down the river. It was terrible, terrible.
As the waters recede, Kempsey takes stock. The Australian government have given £40,000 for relief work, but with the damage set in millions of pounds, it is left to the people in this disaster area to fend for themselves. Like their forefathers who wrested these homes from the wilderness, they will start anew.
The Macleay River is very important for our people. I grew up on this river. Our people camped all the way along the river in the early days, and we just enjoyed life on the river. You know that it gave us connection, education, and it had a lot of life in it. A lot of water in the river. It was so wide, we couldn't even swim across it as kids. It was very important back then, and it's still important today. I've seen floods come and go in this river, the big ones, the little ones, and sometimes they destroy the river too in a lot of ways, but sometimes they change the river flow too. And
every flood is different. It depends on where the rain falls, and it depends on how intense that rainfall is. We have a huge catchment of about 11,500 square kilometres in total, and it ranges greatly in topography. So we've got basically from quite high elevation, particularly when you're talking Australian standards. You know, you're talking up to about 1,400 probably in the more extreme, down to almost below sea level in some of the floodplain areas. Very significant flooding can occur if you get rainfall across the entire catchment. But it's also the shape of the catchment. Consider it like a funnel. The high tablelands area to the west of the catchment fans out and is quite broad, and it funnels in through the gorge country and eventually flows through Kempsey.
We are the combat agency for floods, and what you do, you cannot control a flood, you manage a flood. And by that, the best thing we can do is give people in the community up-to-date information so they can make good decisions and cooperate with what we need them to do. We're on a floodplain. The upriver from Armidale, Gyra, Ben Lomond and Walker, it's like a big funnel. If it rains in the top end of our catchment, everything flows into the Macleay, it comes down. The only good thing about it is that we have plenty of notice from the rain falling up around Armidale Way, through to Georges Creek, Bellbrook and then to Kempsey, because it takes so long for the water to come down. We have time to prepare. The shopkeepers in the CBD, if we know it's going to overtop the levee, they have time to lift their stock or get it out. They've got to make the decision early though, because once the water does get across Belgrave Street, if the levee overtops, they won't be able to get it. A lot of them can't get into their shops to shift their stock.
In the gap between the 49 and the 50 flood, there would have been roads that weren't open very long.
Most of the timber and the logs and all that were gone. So when the 50 came, there wasn't the debris in the river like there was in 49.
And I remember standing up on the landing looking down at the water below. I couldn't believe the water was running through the bottom floor of the guest house.
When the 50 was coming, particularly in our family's case, everything got done so different. There was not a lot of cattle to shift for a start. It was only 10 months later. The kids were taking the Gladstone first up. As soon as it looked like a flood come, the hairs were still standing up on the back of our neck from the 49 flood. So it was fresh in your mind.
The 1963 flood was a very speedy one. Wife and I were standing on here, the water come up over the road. were there, and I said, well, it looks all right, yeah, you know, but it was eddying up and up and up. And it come up into the garage, only just into it, and up in the street and in the walkway there. I swam from here to the other side to try and get into the house over there because I could see it was going to break through the window. Couldn't do it. Same as next door, done that. Swam down to Steve's. I shouldn't have been doing this, but I swam down there and it was, 15 foot high. You could sit here and you had water views. Only way I could get out, I had to go up round the back and jump all the fences, get up, go over the top.
Yeah, I've seen some floods, some terrible floods. We was caught in one flood one day. I lived up a place called Daisy Plains, up and in the forest there, and it rained and rained for months and months, and we couldn't get out. We couldn't get any food to us, health supplies and that, so they had to get us out of there. All the family, there was about 15 families in that area. I think it was SES. They had to get us across the river at Taruka. Taruka, our place, is a special place for our people. We camped there, we fished there. I can remember when we got down to the river and looked at the river, how wide it was and how dangerous it was. And the waves were like the waves at the beach, you know. I can still see everything today, and the fear on my mum's face. She was worried about their children. I seen this boat that these two strong men was taking the families across the other side, and I'm thinking, oh no, the fear went over me, and I'm thinking, my mum, I grabbed hold of my mum and I said, no, we're not jumping in that boat. It's so scary for an 8-year-old child, you know. And all the family, not only our family, the non-Indigenous family was there too. We did it in the end. They got us in, our family. Oh man, that's the biggest flood I've seen.
Just old enough to go into the pub at the 63 flood. And I can remember the water as it was rising in the old Tats pub down there. It was on the lowest level, so the water would have been the first of the 3 hotels in central Kempsey. I was standing there at the bar, up to your knees in water, having a drink.
There was metres and metres of water through all the shops and the houses anywhere in the low-lying area. I remember seeing houses washing down the river, cattle washing down the river dead, trees everywhere, devastation. You know, the town sort of had to come to a standstill. We used to get boats and just float down the main street. Sticky beaking basically, as kids do.
1963, I was a teenager. One vivid memory I have, my brother was a keen surfer with a surfboard, and here he is riding his surfboard down the driveway with the water and the waves running to the back into the swamps. People sitting on roofs, and no one knew they were there. No one knew where they were, whether they were dead or alive, sitting on roofs for days.
Some of the memories that stick are really probably the community spirit. You know, when you talk about floods in this area, the community really pulled together. You know, and unfortunately with floods, there's a lot of people that are victims of floods at various lengths and various degrees. And the community just pulled together to support each other.
In disaster, I've seen a lot of that when people come together and support and share and acknowledge, you know, what they can do and how they did it. And it's sad when it's only come in disaster times, you know. We need to know and understand what the disaster is and how we can approach it. Speak to the people that got knowledge in that area, you know, on even past and present. If SES has got all the knowledge, if the police has got all the knowledge, if there's people in the community who got all the knowledge, listen. It goes a long way if we can just sit at the same table, work together, listen to the knowledge and take the advice.
It's pretty fantastic. Yeah. The SES get right behind it, the people, the shopkeepers, everyone gets in and helps. The SES are brilliant in this town when there's a problem like that happens.
The efforts that emergency services go to when the floods are occurring. Volunteers are out there 24 hours a day. They're unpaid, they're leaving their families behind, they're leaving their normal employment. They don't get paid, and they're out there trudging through floodwaters. You know, they're out there in the pouring rain, they're saving people, they're protecting people's properties. And I think it's something the community should be really proud of, that we have these people that come forward and offer to assist in floods.
The camaraderie is wonderful. That brings a lot of people together. That just doesn't fade over the years, you know, for what they've done for one another during those times. It is just wonderful.
We have a vast array of infrastructure that's been constructed late 60s, early 70s. We've got urban levees, we've got rural levees, and we've also got what we refer to as the flood infrastructure. But ultimately they're a series of gates. Basically their main function is, in a minor flood event to a moderate event, to try to keep as much water within the river as possible and direct it out into the ocean, rather than that water getting out into the floodplain that is used commonly now for agriculture. So naturally, without those levees and structures, in a flood event, water would spill out into those floodplain areas. So the construction of those infrastructure and levees was to protect that land, and also to protect, you know, townships and residences like Smithtown, Gladstone and Kempsey CBD and so on. So we start basically from the outset. As soon as heavy rainfall is predicted or potentially a flood watch is issued, that's when we will really kick into gear and start monitoring things.
The classic example for me was the 2001 flood. I spoke to the local radio stations and requested people to help fill sandbags at a couple of sand dumps that had been set up. The public responded, they came in, they helped fill the sandbags, and then people were able to take them home and put them and help protect their property. That's when you get a major flood, the community comes together and they help each other.
What I remember is every time we got a flood, we had to have sandbags. I can't remember how many times we would have sandbagged the shop, way up the windows, way up the walls to stop water coming in. Trickled around the mall, and I was sitting on the sandbags in front of my shop, and the water just kept coming and coming and coming. I remember breaking down and thinking, hell, this is it, I've lost everything. And it stopped. Miraculously, it stopped at midnight, and I'll never forget that. Yeah, that was an experience, because I was ready to, you know, lose the lot.
We take the example of 2021. That happened extremely quickly, was very high intensity rainfall, and our ability to communicate was shortened in terms of how much time we had to warn and act.
Every flood, there is someone that will do something stupid. Try and drive across a bridge when the water is too high. Now the SES tells everyone, do not enter flood water. But you see images on the TV all the time of people driving through floodwater, and it's so dangerous. Don't do it. Turn around, find another way of getting through.
The humbling thing is a broad catchment, high intensity rainfall event could happen, and you're going to get a severity of flooding that is so far beyond recent living memory, even in those large events that we've been talking about in 2021 and 2022, where that damage was seen in Lismore and surrounding LGAs. Because of the fact that our catchment is so large, we didn't see that in those years, but we could see flooding well beyond that occur again, like what we saw in 1949 and so on, and that is possible.
SES put a lot of work into preparedness and communication to the community about floods. There's a lot of stuff on their webpage. They provide a lot of pamphlets, booklets in relation to preparedness for floods. What I would ask the community is that they take notice of these messages about being prepared for floods. And if you live in an area that's prone to floods, be prepared.
There's a booklet put out by the SES. It's been a big help. You really don't know. It's raining, and all of a sudden. But we do have river heights we work to. We know the perimeter. We know how far it gets before we have to start running and packing.
The important lesson is to not be complacent and to understand that just because a certain flood height hasn't been reached in this community, that it can't get any higher. We talk about the flood of record in 1949, and we talk about probable maximum floods, and community gets very complacent thinking it's never going to reach that. Well, 2022 was a prime example of, you know what, it can go higher than we expect. So they're things that we need to take into account, and we really need to work with our community in that preparedness space. So the emergency preparedness, flood preparedness, everybody's got a role to play in that. Everyone has a responsibility through emergency services, through local government, through our organisation, down to the individual that lives on the floodplain.
Follow the directions that we give. If we tell you to evacuate, do so. Do not stay there, because if you lose power and water, you may be isolated and no one will be able to come and rescue you. If it is too dangerous, we will not put our own members' lives at risk to get someone out if it cannot be. And there will be situations where they will not be able to get in to get you. So if you're asked to evacuate, do so. We will have another major flood. It's just when the conditions are right, you get an east coast low forming off the coast, you get a lot of rain in the catchment, or an ex-tropical cyclone comes down, that's normally when we get our major floods. And because we are on the floodplain, it always is going to happen here in Kempsey.